Don't die on me, sweetheart. I had no idea why I said those words to a little girl I had never seen before, but the moment I pulled her from the wrecked car, something inside me changed. My name is Ethan Callahan. Most people in my city knew me as a man who never stopped for anyone. That night, I stopped. Rain had turned the highway into a sheet of silver, and I was driving home after a meeting that should have ended hours earlier. My driver had just slowed near an intersection when I saw the headlights. A small sedan had spun across 2 lanes and come to rest against a concrete barrier. I heard the sharp hiss of steam before I saw the child inside. Stop the car. My driver looked at me in the mirror. Mr. Callahan, stop. The car pulled over. I was out before anyone could argue. I moved through the rain toward the sedan and found a little girl sitting in the back seat, frightened but conscious. She couldn't have been more than 7. Her brown hair was damp, her cheeks pale, and her small hands were wrapped tightly around a faded silver necklace. Hey, I said softly. Can you hear me? She nodded. What's your name? Her lips trembled. Lily. I looked around for an adult, but no one came. Lily, I'm going to get you somewhere safe. I kept my voice calm as I helped her out of the car and carried her toward my SUV. She was surprisingly light. Too light. She held onto the front of my coat with both hands, as though letting go would make the world disappear. Inside the SUV, I wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. One of my men called for medical help, but Lily barely seemed to hear him. She was staring at me, not at my suit, not at the rain dripping from my hair, at my face. Her expression slowly changed from fear to something I couldn't understand. What is it? I asked. She reached up and touched my cheek with one tiny hand. Then she whispered, You look like him. My breath caught. Like who? She looked down at the necklace around her neck. The man in Mommy's picture. I froze. For 7 years, I had carried one photograph inside my desk drawer. A photograph of a newborn baby girl. My daughter. The child I had been told was gone forever. I had never shown that photograph to anyone outside my closest circle. I had never spoken about her in public. And yet this little girl was looking at me as if she had seen my face somewhere before. Lily, I whispered, where did you get that necklace? Her fingers closed around the silver pendant. She looked directly into my eyes. Mommy said my daddy gave it to me. The world seemed to go completely silent. I stared at the necklace again. There was a tiny crescent-shaped mark engraved on its back. A mark I remembered choosing myself, 7 years ago, for a daughter I believed I had lost. I had stopped believing in miracles a long time ago. But that night, for the first time in 7 years, I wondered if I had been wrong. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beep of a monitor, but I could not stop staring at the silver necklace around Lily's neck. I had seen that crescent before. I had held it in my hand the night I bought it, 7 years ago, when I was still a man who believed he had time to become the father my daughter deserved. Now a little girl sat on a hospital bed beneath a warm blanket, watching me as if she already knew the answer to a question I was afraid to ask. Where is your mother, Lily? I asked gently. She looked toward the window. She is coming. What is her name? Lily hesitated. Claire. The name meant nothing to me. I stepped closer and studied the pendant again. The engraving was small, almost invisible beneath the hospital lights. A crescent moon. 3 tiny stars. My design. There was no chance someone had accidentally created the exact same necklace. Lily, did your mother tell you who gave this to you? She nodded. She said my daddy gave it to me before I was born. My chest tightened. Before I was born. Those 4 words followed me long after the doctor entered the room. He examined Lily, asked a few simple questions, and told me she was shaken but appeared stable. I barely heard him. My mind was somewhere else. 7 years earlier. A hospital hallway. A closed door. A nurse telling me my newborn daughter had not survived. I remembered standing there. Without speaking. I remembered the tiny white blanket I had never been allowed to hold. I remembered my wife disappearing before sunrise. After that night, I had searched for answers until there were none left to find. Or so I thought. Mr. Callahan. My driver stood quietly near the doorway. We found her belongings. He handed me a small plastic bag from the accident scene. Inside was a child's backpack, a picture book, and a folded photograph. I opened it. My hand stopped moving. The picture showed Lily standing beside a woman with light brown hair. Claire. I had never met her, but there was something else in the photograph. Behind them was a small wooden house with a blue door. I knew that house. I had seen it once in an old photograph from 7 years ago, taken during the final week of my marriage. My heart began pounding. "Find this woman," I said. My driver nodded. Then Lily spoke from the bed. "You do not have to find her." I turned. "Why?" Lily looked at the photograph in my hand. "She always comes back for me." I swallowed hard. "Lily, how long have you lived with Claire?" She counted quietly on her fingers. "Since I was a baby." A cold silence settled over the room. I looked at the photograph again, then at the necklace, then at the little girl who carried the face of a past I had spent 7 years trying to bury. There was one question left. One question I was almost afraid to ask. "Lily, what was your name before Claire took care of you?" She stared at me for several seconds. Then she whispered. She told me never to say it. My pulse quickened. "Why?" Lily looked toward the hospital door. "Because bad people might hear." The words "bad people might hear" stayed with me long after Lily fell asleep. I stood beside the hospital window, watching rain slide down the glass, while the city blurred into 1,000 pale reflections below. I had spent 7 years believing my daughter was gone. Now, somewhere behind me, a little girl was sleeping with the necklace I had chosen for her before she was even born. I needed answers. But more than that, I needed to understand why no one had told me she was alive. I called my driver and asked him to investigate Claire Morgan without disturbing her. Within 20 minutes, he returned with a thin folder. Claire Morgan, 41 years old. No criminal history. No known connection to my organization. She had lived in the same small town outside Albany for nearly 7 years. She worked at a local elementary school and had never made a public claim about Lily. That should have made me feel better. It did not. I opened the folder and found one photograph. Claire was standing beside a young woman I recognized immediately. My wife, 7 years younger, smiling, holding a newborn baby in her arms. My hands went still. I remembered that day. I remembered the hospital room. I remembered being told that the baby had not survived. But the photograph had been taken after that supposed loss. There was no date on it. No explanation. Only one detail that made my heart sink. The woman standing beside Claire was wearing the same silver crescent necklace Lily now carried. I walked back toward the bed. Lily was awake. Her eyes were open, but she remained perfectly still beneath the blanket. "Lily," I said softly, "do you remember your mother?" She nodded. "What did she look like?" Lily thought for a moment. "She had eyes like mine." I sat beside her. "What was her name?" She looked at me with a sadness that seemed far too old for 7 years. "Mommy." I almost smiled, but then she continued. "Sometimes she cried when she looked at your picture." My heart stopped. "My picture?" Lily nodded. "Claire kept it in a drawer." I could barely breathe. "What picture?" Lily reached toward the small backpack on the chair. I handed it to her. She opened the front pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She placed it in my hand. It was not a photograph. It was a drawing made with colored pencils. A little girl stood between 2 adults beneath a crescent moon. One woman held her hand. The man stood on the other side. I stared at the figure of the man. Dark suit. Black hair. A small mark beside his left eyebrow. It looked exactly like me. "Who drew this?" I whispered. "I did," Lily said. "Claire told me he was my daddy." I looked at her. "Did she ever tell you his name?" Lily shook her head. Then, she pointed at the drawing. She said his name was Ethan. My entire body went still. There was no way she could know that. No one at the hospital had said my name in front of her. I had never introduced myself. I looked at the little girl again, and for the first time, I allowed myself to consider the impossible. What if I had not lost my daughter 7 years ago? What if someone had taken her from me? And what if the woman I had trusted with the truth had been hiding the answer all along? Then Lily reached for my hand. Her fingers were warm and small. "Are you really my daddy?" she asked. I looked into her eyes, and for once in my life, I had no answer. "Are you really my daddy?" Lily's question stayed between us, fragile and impossible. I looked at her small hand resting in mine and felt something I had not allowed myself to feel in years. Hope. It scared me more than grief ever had. I could have lied. I could have told her that I was not sure, that she should wait for Claire, that adults sometimes looked alike. Instead, I said the only thing I knew for certain. "I do not know yet, Lily, but I promise I am going to find out." She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded as if that answer was enough. I left her room and closed the door quietly behind me. My driver was waiting in the hallway. "I want everything connected to Claire Morgan," I said. "And I want the records from 7 years ago. Hospital records, adoption records, birth records, everything." He hesitated. You think the girl is your daughter? I looked back at the closed door. I think someone has been lying to me for 7 years. By sunrise, the first file arrived. My hands were steady when I opened it. They were not steady when I saw the date. Lily had been born on the same night my daughter was supposedly lost. The hospital name was the same. The attending physician was the same. Even the birth weight matched. 6 pounds, 9 ounces. I read the number twice. Then again. It was too precise to dismiss. I turned the page. The original birth record listed the mother as my wife. The father's name had been left blank. That was impossible. I had signed those papers myself. Or at least, I thought I had. Another document had been added later. A handwritten note. Infant transferred at parental request. No signature. No explanation. No destination. My throat tightened. Someone had altered the record. Someone had moved my daughter. I called the hospital administrator. He arrived less than an hour later, pale and nervous. Mr. Callahan, those records are sealed. Then why is there a handwritten transfer note? He stared at the page. I have never seen that before. Who worked that night? He gave me 3 names. One of them stopped me cold. Dr. Samuel Reeves. My wife's personal physician. The same man who had stood beside me 7 years ago and told me there was nothing more I could do. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. Memory came rushing in. The white hospital hallway. The smell of coffee. My wife crying behind a closed door. Dr. Reeves telling me to trust him. I had trusted him. That trust had cost me 7 years with my child. Find him, I said. He moved to Oregon, the administrator replied. 3 years ago. I opened my eyes. Then we are going to Oregon. Before I could stand, my phone rang. It was the nurse watching Lily. Her voice was quiet. Mr. Callahan, Lily is awake. Is she all right? She keeps asking for you. Something inside me softened. I walked back toward her room. Lily was sitting up, holding the silver necklace between her fingers. When she saw me, she smiled. Then she said something that made me stop in the doorway. Daddy, I remembered something. I could barely breathe. What did you remember? She looked toward the window. Mommy told me that you did not know where I was. A pause. Then her eyes filled with tears. She said you were looking for me. She said you were looking for me. I repeated Lily's words in my head as I sat beside her hospital bed, afraid that if I spoke too quickly, the fragile truth would disappear. Did Mommy tell you anything else? Lily nodded. She said you were a good man. I looked away. No one had called me that in a very long time. When did she tell you? Before we moved. I turned back to her. Where did you live before? Lily gave me the name of a small town in Vermont. My driver found the address within minutes. A farmhouse. Blue door. Same house from the photograph. I stared at the screen, feeling the past close around me. Lily, why did you move? She lowered her eyes. Claire said we had to. Did she say why? She said someone was asking questions. My phone rang. It was my driver. His voice had changed. Mr. Callahan, you need to see this. I stepped into the hallway. He sent me a photograph. It showed Claire standing outside the farmhouse 3 years earlier. Beside her was my wife. Alive. Older. Holding Lily's hand. I forgot how to breathe. My wife had been alive after the night I was told she had disappeared. And she had been raising our daughter. Where is she now? I asked. We are still looking. I returned to Lily's room and found her staring at the rain outside. Lily, I said carefully. When was the last time you saw your mother? She thought for a moment. Last Christmas. Was she with you? No. She came for 1 day. My heart sank. Did she tell you where she was going? Lily nodded. She said she had to fix something. What? Lily looked at me. She said she had made a mistake a long time ago. I sat down slowly. A mistake. 7 years of silence. A missing child. A wife who had vanished. None of it felt accidental anymore. Then Lily reached beneath her pillow and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Mommy told me to keep this, she said. I opened it. There were only 3 lines written in familiar handwriting. Ethan, if you ever find her, do not blame Lily. She never knew what happened. And do not trust the man who told you she was gone. My hands began to tremble. Dr. Samuel Reeves. The name appeared in my mind immediately. The doctor who had told me my daughter was dead. The doctor who had signed the original records. The doctor who had disappeared 3 years later. I looked at Lily. She was watching me with quiet concern. Are you okay, Daddy? I swallowed hard. Yes, sweetheart. It was the first time she had called me Daddy. I did not correct her. I could not. I reached for her hand and held it gently. I am going to find your mother, I promised. and I am going to find out the truth. For the first time, Lily smiled without fear. Then my phone rang again. My driver spoke only 6 words. We found Claire Morgan. She is here. I froze. Where? He gave me an address. It was less than 20 minutes away. But then he added something that made the room feel suddenly smaller. She asked for you by name. She asked for me by name. I repeated the words quietly as I stood in the hospital hallway, staring at the address on my phone. Claire Morgan was less than 20 minutes away. The woman who had raised my daughter was finally within reach. I wanted answers, but I also knew one thing now. I could not afford to rush this. Lily was still recovering in the hospital, and every decision I made had to protect her first. I called my driver and told him to stay with Lily while I went alone. The address led me to a small bookstore on a quiet street. The rain had stopped, leaving the sidewalks shining beneath the streetlights. I stepped through the glass door and heard a bell above my head. A woman stood at the back of the store beside a shelf of children's books. Light brown hair, tired eyes, a face I had never seen before, yet somehow recognized from the photograph. Claire turned toward me. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, "Ethan." Hearing my name from her lips felt like opening a door I had spent 7 years trying to keep closed. "Where is my wife?" I asked. Claire looked down. "She is alive." My chest tightened. "Where?" "I do not know." "You expect me to believe that?" Claire shook her head. "No. I expect you to be angry." I took a slow breath. "Tell me what happened." Claire sat at a small table near the window. I remained standing. She looked older than she had in the photograph, but there was something in her expression that told me she had carried this secret for years. "Your wife came to me the night Lily was born," she said. "She was terrified. She believed someone had discovered where she had hidden the baby." "Who?" Claire looked toward the front door before answering. "Dr. Reeves." The name landed like a stone in my chest. "He told you my daughter was dead." "Yes." "And you believed him?" "No." Claire reached into her bag and placed a small envelope on the table. "Your wife gave me this." I opened it carefully. Inside was another photograph. Lily as an infant, my wife beside her, and behind them, written in blue ink, were 4 words. "Keep her away from Reeves." My hands tightened around the photograph. "Why did my wife leave Lily with you?" Claire's eyes filled with tears. "Because she thought staying near her would put Lily in greater danger." "And me?" Claire looked at me. "She wanted to tell you. She tried." I stared at her. "Then why did she not?" Claire hesitated. "Because Reeves convinced everyone that you would never forgive her." I felt the room grow quiet. 7 years of grief. 7 years of searching. 7 years of believing I had failed my family. All because someone had built a lie around us. "Where is she now?" I asked again. Claire looked at the photograph in my hand. "The last time I heard from her, she was trying to find proof." "Proof of what?" Claire lowered her voice. "That Lily was never lost." I looked up. "Then what was she?" Claire met my eyes. "Hidden." My phone began to ring. It was the hospital. I answered immediately. The nurse sounded calm, but her next words made my heart stop. "Mr. Callahan, Lily is asking for you. She says she remembers where her mother went." "Daddy, I know where Mommy went." Lily's words made me forget everything Claire had just told me. I was already moving before the call ended. The drive back to the hospital felt longer than the entire night. When I entered Lily's room, she was sitting beneath the blanket, holding her silver necklace in both hands. "Tell me," I said gently, "where did your mother go?" Lily pointed toward the window. "She went to the blue house." My heart tightened. "The house in Vermont." She nodded, but she did not stay there. She told me to wait with Claire. "When was this?" "Last Christmas." I sat beside her. "Did she say where she was going after that?" Lily looked at the ceiling, trying to remember. "She said she was going to meet a man who had something that belonged to Daddy." My eyes narrowed. "What man?" "The doctor. Dr. Reeves." Of course. Claire had warned me about him. My driver entered the room with a folder in his hand. "We found an old address for Samuel Reeves," he said. "He left Oregon 6 months ago. Before that, he rented an office in Boston." Boston. Another city. Another trail. But Lily suddenly reached for my sleeve. "Daddy, there is more." I looked at her. "What is it?" She touched the crescent pendant. "Mommy told me if I ever saw you, I should give you this." She carefully opened the back of the pendant. I had never known it could open. Inside was a tiny folded piece of paper. I unfolded it with shaking fingers. There was a single sentence written in my wife's handwriting. "Ethan, if Lily is with you, Then the truth finally found its way home. I closed my eyes for a moment. Then I noticed something beneath the sentence. A date. March 14th. Tomorrow. What does this mean? My driver asked. I looked at the calendar on the wall. March 13th. Tomorrow was March 14th. Lily watched my face. Mommy said that date was important. I stood slowly. We are going to find her. My driver nodded. But before we could leave, the hospital administrator appeared at the doorway. His expression was unusually serious. Mr. Callahan, there is something you need to know. He handed me a sealed envelope. This was found in the hospital archive this morning. I opened it. Inside was a copy of the original birth record from 7 years ago. This version contained one detail that the earlier file did not. Under the section marked child's name, someone had written a name in faded ink. Lily Callahan. I stared at it. My daughter had never been officially recorded as dead. She had been recorded as mine. Someone had simply removed her name afterward. I looked at Lily, and suddenly the years of searching made sense. I had not been chasing a ghost. I had been chasing a person hidden behind paperwork, fear, and lies. Then my phone rang. An unknown number. I answered. No one spoke for several seconds. Then a woman whispered, "Ethan, it is me." I knew that voice before she said another word. My wife. Lily's mother. Where are you? I asked. Her breathing trembled. I am close. Tell me where. Silence. Then she said, "Do not come alone." The call ended. I looked at Lily. She was watching me with complete trust. For 7 years, I had thought finding my daughter would be the end of my search. I finally understood. It was only the beginning. Ethan, if you can hear me, please do not come looking for me until you understand what happened 7 years ago. My wife's voice stayed in my mind as I stood in the hospital corridor, staring at the phone in my hand. She had called after 7 years of silence. She had told me she was close. And then she had asked me not to come alone. I looked at Lily through the glass. She was sitting quietly on the bed, holding the silver necklace against her chest. 7 years ago, I had lost both of them in the same night. Tonight, I had found my daughter. Now I was finally close to finding her mother. I need to know where that call came from, I told my driver. He worked quickly. Less than 5 minutes later, he returned with an address. An old train station outside the city, closed for renovations. I felt something tighten in my chest. It was exactly the kind of place someone would choose if they wanted privacy. But I could not leave Lily behind without making sure she was safe. I turned to Claire. Stay with her. Claire nodded. I will. Lily looked at me. Are you going to find Mommy? I knelt beside her bed. I am going to try. She reached out and touched my hand. She will be happy. I smiled despite everything. I hope so. Before I left, Lily pulled me closer and whispered, "Daddy, remember the song?" I froze. What song? She began humming softly. It was the same lullaby I had heard her mention before. The same melody my mother used to sing to me when I was a child. Then I remembered something I had almost forgotten. I had sung that song to my daughter the night she was born. Only once. She had been too young to remember. Yet Lily knew it. I stood there, overwhelmed by the weight of the truth. I will remember, I whispered. The train station was nearly empty when I arrived. The clock above the entrance showed 11:42 at night. Rain tapped softly against the glass roof. I walked through the silent waiting area and saw a woman standing near the far platform. Light brown hair, gray coat. Her hands were folded tightly in front of her. I knew her immediately. Claire was right, she said. You found Lily. I took one step closer. Why did you leave? Her eyes filled with tears. Because I thought it was the only way to keep her alive and safe. You let me believe she was gone. I know. Her voice broke. And I have regretted it every single day. I wanted to ask 100 questions, but one mattered more than all the others. Why did Dr. Reeves tell me my daughter was dead? She looked at me for several seconds. Because he wanted you to believe the story. What story? She reached into her coat and pulled out a small folder. The story that Lily was never your daughter. My heart sank. Then what was he trying to hide? She opened the folder and handed me a document. My eyes moved across the page. Then they stopped. The name of the child was written clearly. Lily Callahan. My daughter. My wife whispered. Ethan, I never stopped looking for you. I looked at her through tears I did not bother hiding. And I never stopped looking for you. She reached for my hand. For the first time in 7 years, we stood together with the truth between us. Then my phone rang. It was Claire. Her voice was trembling. Ethan, you need to come back to the hospital. Why? She took a breath. The DNA results are ready. The DNA results are ready. Claire's words followed us all the way back to the hospital. My wife sat beside me in the car, silent, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Neither of us knew what to say. 7 years of questions had suddenly become one moment. When we entered Lily's room, she looked up and smiled. "You came back, Daddy." I stopped for half a second. I still was not used to hearing that word, but I knew I never wanted to hear anything else. I walked to her bedside and took her hand. "I told you I would." Claire stood near the window while my wife remained behind me, unable to take another step. Lily looked at her. "Mommy." My wife covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. Lily reached toward her, and she immediately knelt beside the bed. They held each other quietly. I turned away for a moment. 7 years of distance disappeared in a single embrace. Then the doctor entered with a sealed envelope. "Mr. Callahan," he said, "the results are conclusive." I opened it. My eyes moved across the page once. Then again. There was no uncertainty, no room for doubt. Lily was my biological daughter. I lowered the paper and looked at her. The little girl I had carried from a car accident only hours earlier was the same child I had spent 7 years believing I had lost forever. My wife began to cry. "I am sorry," she whispered. I looked at her. "Why did you not tell me?" She wiped her tears. "Because I was afraid. Reeves told me there were people who would use Lily to get to you. He convinced me that disappearing was the only way to protect her." I looked at Lily, then back at her. "You should have trusted me." She nodded. "I know." There was no anger left in me, only exhaustion. 7 years of wondering. 7 years of empty rooms and unanswered questions. I had imagined this moment so many times, but never like this. Lily squeezed my hand. "Daddy." I looked down. "Yes." "Can I go home with you?" My throat tightened. "Yes, sweetheart. You can." She smiled. "Do I have a room?" I laughed softly for the first time in years. "You have had a room waiting for you for 7 years." Her eyes widened. "Really? Really?" That evening, I took Lily home. The house had always felt too large to me. Marble floors, high ceilings, rooms that were beautiful but strangely quiet. That night, everything sounded different. Lily ran through the hallway with her small backpack, asking questions about every room. She stopped at the staircase and looked at me. "Which one is mine?" I led her upstairs. Behind a door I had never opened since the day it was prepared was a room filled with sunlight, books, and toys that had been waiting untouched for 7 years. Lily stood in the doorway. "You kept it." I nodded. I could not let it go. She walked inside and touched a small wooden horse on the shelf. Then she turned and ran back into my arms. I held my daughter close, finally understanding something I had forgotten. Power could build walls. Money could buy beautiful rooms. But neither could replace the sound of a child calling you home. I had spent 7 years ruling a city that feared me. It took one little girl calling me daddy to teach me what home really meant. And for the first time in 7 years, I was no longer waiting for my family to come back. They were already home.